G'day guys, Rukshan here. Thanks for joining me for this news vlog. It's very sunny out today. Apparently we're in the midst of a heat wave here in Australia, so let me know how you guys are dealing with the temperatures. Is it really as bad as it's been made to sound in the media? Every time we hit above 30 degrees these days, it's always a heat wave according to the media, and it's extreme temperatures that we need to be careful of. But I remember growing up back in the day in the 90s, when it was really hot in Australia, it felt kind of the same to me, but maybe I'm just misinterpreting my experiences as a child. Let me know what you think. Now, first up, I just wanted to bring this news that's been breaking today, and that is that the US has started retaliatory attacks against Iranian-backed militia forces in the Middle East, namely in Iraq and Syria. So the US on Friday began to carry out retaliatory strikes in Iraq and Syria against Iran-backed militants and Iranian military targets for a drone strike on American base in Jordan last Sunday that killed 3 US service members. So I'll probably touch on this news during the rest of this week, but what I wanted to point out was we've been knowing about these strikes that are coming for the last 3-4 days since the US announced that they were going to do something. So if any smart military people are out there, especially those with Iranian interests, I'm sure they would have moved any personnel or important technology or whatever else resources out of harm's way. So if anything, they're just going to be hitting infrastructure and the low-lying targets is what I believe, unless we see something dramatic. This is an interesting stage of the world when it comes to war, where we receive pre-warning of impending strikes where you get a couple of days advance notice. Maybe that's just the world we live in now. The actual stories that I wanted to cover today was around these comments made by Chris Minns. So Chris Minns was asked about members of his own parliament team in the Labour Party, as well as just in general politicians discussing issues to do with the conflict in the Middle East. And this is what he had to say.
Parliament is back next week.
Yeah.
There appears to be some discontent on your backbench to do with Labor's position on what's happening in Gaza following Hamas's attack. Some feel that you need to speak out more strongly, particularly about the civilian casualties in Gaza. Have you had any conversations with any MPs asking them not to speak about this issue?
Well, look, I mean, a couple of things that are important here. Firstly, I've spoken extensively about my concern about the loss of innocent lives on both sides of that conflict, and I've done that repeatedly, and I've done that in public. But I'll be honest with you, Nick, it's going to be the responsibility of the New South Wales government to focus on issues and challenges here in New South Wales. We don't have a foreign policy in the state. We don't have a Minister for Foreign Affairs. The people of New South Wales elect us to solve the problems in New South Wales. And I can understand people feel passionately about international affairs, but honestly, if that's your passion and that's where your desires are, your policy interests are, well, run for federal parliament. I mean, when we've solved all the problems in New South Wales, then we can move on to the Middle East, but we're a long way from that.
So you're essentially publicly telling them to pipe down? Well,
look, I'm being honest. I mean, I've seen members of parliament in my government that have made public comments. I'm going to be the same way. If I'm asked a direct question, I'll give a direct reply.
Anyway, you get the idea there. Look, I don't normally agree with these Labour politicians when it comes to many issues, but Chris Minns, in my opinion, is correct here. We have too many state politicians who are concerning themselves with foreign affairs when they should be concerned with matters of the state. We have so many problems across all our states, especially here in Victoria, even in New South Wales, that we don't have time for these state politicians to be pontificating about foreign affairs and policy in the Middle East. Like, that's not their role. That's not what they're elected for. And I completely agree with the sentiments here expressed by the New South Wales Premier. Now, what's worse than state premiers being involved in all of this is the local councils, whose only job should be collecting rubbish, beautifying the local town areas because they're collecting council rates from you. Things like this, services for the local towns and areas that they manage, right? Instead, we have local councils all across our country, particularly in New South Wales and in Victoria, who are, passing ceasefire resolutions for the conflict that's happening in Israel, right? So we have, for instance, this is the Marybeck Council. They passed a resolution on November 8th last year, and they had, 4 points. So they mourn the tragic loss of civilian lives, and the current conflict condemns the attacks against civilians. recognizes that the constant bombing and total siege of Gaza is traumatizing for many Marib extenders who have relatives in the region. All right, maybe you can pass that off as something the council might want to be concerned about. Note that the current conflict did not begin on October 7th, 2023. It began with the occupation of Palestine and the forced displacement of millions of Palestinians from their homeland as a result, and condemns the words of senior Israeli politicians and military officials that seek to dehumanize Palestinians in Gaza. All right, so now we're seeing into an area where really the input of the council is not required in this space. If they want to share opinions and have a social media page and share with their audience, their people in their town about what they think about what's happening in the Middle East, go for it. It's a free country and everyone should be able to express themselves, state politicians, whoever else, right? That's fine. But councillors actually using council time to pass resolutions asking for a ceasefire and then condemning and then kind of talk about the history of the conflict, all these kind of things. It's just ridiculous. We had the similar thing happening in the city of Dandenong, where I hail from originally, and they passed a resolution calling for a permanent ceasefire as well. And there's all types of bloody issues in Dandenong. I grew up there, and they don't have time to be passing ceasefire motions for what's happening for something that they have no input into, no control over, nothing. It's just complete theatrics. Of course, some of these council areas have large populations of people who are from the Middle East region, for instance, and maybe trying to appease them for votes. Who knows? It seems that way, but actually it's meaningless what they're doing. So good on Chris Minns for saying this. I totally agree with this. Federal politicians, those involved in the foreign affairs and those kind of things, they have direct responsibilities to to share with the public how our country is dealing with those situations, how our aid money is being spent, all this type of thing. Completely valid things for federal politicians are doing, particularly those in the foreign affairs ministries. But yeah, not state politicians and not local councillors in any official capacity. It doesn't make sense. And on that, Australia has finally, the Albanese government has finally recognized October 7th as a terrorist attack. And this is after 100 days after the attack. So I didn't know this fact, but maybe some of you guys knew this. But apparently in Australia, if there's a recognized terrorist attack and Australians are impacted or close family members are impacted, they can actually receive a payout of up to $75,000 in financial assistance. I'm not sure how many people are waiting for this, but most of the world had already recognized it, at least the Western world had recognized it as a terror attack, but it took Australia 100 days to do that, which is, I wanted to bring that up because that was quite interesting. Now, the other update that I wanted to give you guys is around the farmers' protest. So in France, the farmers' protest, some of the unions who are involved in the protest have called on their members to end the blockade, end some of their protest activity because they've gotten concessions from the French government. So these protests have had a meaningful impact in France, at least. In Italy, we're also seeing protesters gathering in their tractors and taking to the streets as well. So it's a global movement. And like I said, next week I'll be there in Canberra covering the Reckless Renewables rally. And interestingly, there is a counter protest organized against the farmers' protest, which is happening in Canberra. Very Australian left for that to be happening, organized by Get Up. So they're turning up saying that this is a culture war the hard right is hoping to import from the United States, where big oil is funding anti-renewable groups and conservative politicians to stop offshore wind threatening their profits. Now, according to this article on Sky News, everyone's going at their own expense. The politicians, no one's being funded by anyone. It's all grassroots. The farmers are turning up on their own volition. People like me, the media, independent media, who are going there to cover it. We're going there. We're not being funded by anyone. So these left-wing lunatics, usually these get-up groups, like to bring up that there's some type of big oil conspiracy to fund the farmers against protests against these renewable, green policies. When in actual fact, it's just farmers, ordinary people who are impacted by these policies, protesting. Like, they never believed that to be the case. Especially when groups like Get Up, it's being linked to all types of shady funding very openly, and they accept all types of fundings from renewable industries, right? So it's like they're just hypocrites, these groups. Next up, guys, there's been a few attacks by illegal immigrants that we're seeing around the world. I feel fortunate in Australia that we are surrounded by water, and we do not have the very weak borders that you're seeing in many parts of Europe and especially the US. I know that for a long time there we had a lot of boats arriving, and A lot of governments took measures to stop the boats arriving, and there is still instances of this happening, but it's not as pronounced as what we're seeing in the US and Europe. Now, these illegal immigrants and these asylum seekers, frankly, there are many amongst them who are committing crimes in these countries, who are offering them asylum safety. Sometimes they're offering them credit cards with, like, public funds for spending. In New York, they're being put up in hotels. Right, it's like a very good deal that they're getting, and at the expense of the locals. Right, sometimes you've seen people kicked out of homeless shelters. You've seen people kicked out of like schools shut down so they could have these illegal migrants there sheltering. So all this crazy stuff, right? But in between all of that, some of these migrants are committing crimes. These illegal immigrants are committing crimes. And in New York, there was a very brazen attack on New York police officers. But the people that committed the attack, who were taken in by the police, have been released, right? And this is their reaction after being released. Let's have a look at this video.
What? Is that how you respect
I don't speak English.
Is that how you respect the space?
I don't speak English. I don't speak English.
You speak English?
No,
No English?
español.
Espanol? Just... You like America?
He's flipping the bird there, but look at these little pricks, right? So ungrateful. They don't give a crap. They're committing crimes. They're beating up cops. But what's worse than what they're doing is, right, after the authorities arrest them, they're being released. And at least, I think there were 7 or 8 people released. Half of them have just disappeared after being released. So what's going on, right? I blame the authorities. We blame these weak policies of especially progressive governments that don't seem to understand that you need to have strict migration policies. You need to have strict policies around asylum seekers as well, because not all of them are good eggs. And the vast majority that we're seeing in America right now are proving this to us by the fact that they don't seem to give a crap. They seem to be entitled little craps when it comes to these people especially. On that as well, in the UK, we've had a similar incident of someone who has twice been rejected asylum seeker status, then the third time granted asylum seeker status because a church vouched for his conversion to Christianity, attacking a mother and 2 children with a corrosive substance like an acid type attack. And that guy's on the run now. And if you look into this guy's history, there's a history of sexual assault. It's crazy, right? This is an asylum seeker from Afghanistan in the UK. Again, these people are coming in. They have these known histories. They've been rejected, but there's people within these countries who are vouching for these type of individuals and letting them into the country. And this is all at the expense of legitimate migrants, people that can contribute to society, for instance, being put through the ringer, being put through crazy processes to get into the country to begin with their families. I'm talking about people who are well educated or established, whatever. These people go through the hardest system to get in, whereas these people who have no respect whatsoever to the laws, to the land that they live in, and then go on to commit more crimes, just get let in. So let's have a look at this story.
A horrific incident that occurred last night, which resulted in a 31-year-old female and 2 children aged 3 and 8 being attacked with a corrosive substance, which we now confirm to be an alkali. A male was with them in the vicinity, a 35-year-old male called Abdul Izedi, and he left the scene. But the injuries to the female and children, they're in a stable condition, but we are just monitoring, but they don't seem to be life-threatening, but at this time they could be life-changing. The male was last seen...
Definitely life-changing, and I believe at least the older woman, the mother, is in a very bad way. Now, this particular individual, when this all came out, the police are very slow to release a description of who it was, slow to release names, the usual, right? They want to be very careful when they're naming particular suspects, but everyone kind of had this idea of what might have happened based on the type of attack it was, right? This type of acid attack, it's common in certain part of the world, common in parts of South Asia, common in parts of the Middle East, where these individuals use these type of materials to disfigure, in particular, women and children. Right, this happens all the time in those regions. So a lot of people had an idea of who may have committed such an attack. But yes, it does turn out it's this individual called Abdul Azidi. Now, the current status is, I'll just read this to you. The suspect was twice denied asylum in the UK before being allowed to stay after claiming he had converted to Christianity. Now, the church, interestingly, church insists not our job to vet asylum seekers after Clapham suspects conversion. Afghan sex offender wanted over chemical attack had a priest vouch he had converted to Christianity to stay in Britain. The Church of England has said it's not a job to vet asylum seekers after he emerged. An Afghan sex offender wanted over an acid attack had a priest vouch he had converted to Christianity so he could stay in Britain. Now, I've looked into this a little bit, and apparently one of the tricks used by certain asylum seekers is to say that they've now in the country, okay, and they're facing the likelihood of deportation. All right, so we've now converted to Christianity. Okay, the priests or the churches vouch for them, and the whole reason behind this is to say that, oh, if we go back to our country of origin, where you can't be a Christian, they will execute me or they will kill me, so therefore I can't leave whatsoever. Even though you have all types of grounds to send me back and deport me, well, look, I'm a good Christian now, so you have to let me stay in this Christian country, right? And based on this guy's history, people are saying that he was pretending this. The people are saying that he was a devout Muslim, for instance, and he wasn't really a Christian. He was just pretending to be one. All right, it's crazy stuff I'm reading, and I know it could be offensive to some people, the things I'm saying, but I'm just reading it as it is. Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister, has said that he expects the Home Secretary to carry out a detailed review of how Abdul Azidi was granted asylum. Staff at the biker butcher shop in the East Newcastle, where Azidi bought halal meat, said they were horrified that he had been connected to the attack because he was a good Muslim. Rishi Sunak does not think foreign criminals should be able to stay in the UK. Well, no shit. No foreign criminals should be allowed to stay, especially if they're coming as illegal immigrants or asylum seekers. Abdul Azidi was placed on a sex offender register for 10 years. Church of England says its role in the Home Office to vet asylum seekers. Commander John Saville says mother's injury is expected to be life-changing. The suspect was last seen on the Victoria line. So he is still at large. This deranged maniac who's throwing acid at people, he's still at large, and yeah, this has been life-altering for that woman. Like, you would be horrified if you see the images of women who have suffered these acid attacks, and sometimes it's over the most pettiest of things. It could be a fact that this person made some type of advance, they could have been in some sort of relationship. I'm not sure of the exact full details, but over the smallest, pettiest thing, they disfigure these women, and it's just horrendous and it's horrific. And it's a barbarity that we shouldn't be accepting in the Western world. Next story that I have, guys, actually, no, beyond that, this is what UK MP has to say.
I think the fact that he was a convicted sex offender is definitely an issue for concern. Anybody who commits a heinous act like that, you really want to understand, I suppose, why perhaps they may have not spent more time perhaps in prison or something of the like. His asylum status, though, is not really the issue of concern. The issue is that he would attack a woman and her children in this particular way, and the fact that we have ever-increasing incidences of violence against women.
Well, that's what progressive MPs, it sounds like, are saying. Next up, guys, this is the last story for the day, and this is around Victoria Police. I keep running into these stories with Victoria Police that shows some level of incompetence, and this is no different to that. And this concerns me because we are living in a world increasingly where everything is digitized, in particular, information around our identities. This is quite concerning that this was allowed to happen. So let me read the story. A convicted killer uncovered details after being able to remove hundreds of redactions. A special task force has been launched to investigate how a murderer serving time in maximum security Barwon prison was able to view redacted names of victims and witnesses. A notorious murderer has been able to find the hidden names and details of 186 victims, witnesses, and police from documents sent to him by prosecutors. In a major security breach, the convicted killer uncovered the information after being able to remove hundreds of redactions in electronic documents sent to him under legal discoveries relating to further serious charges he is facing. The Herald Sun understands the police identified in October that the man had been able to remove the redactions inside maximum security Barwon prison near Geelong, where he is jailed over an infamous 1980s homicide. The prisoner's name cannot be published for legal reasons. So if you want to look that up, you can go to the Herald Sun and read a little bit more about it. But yes, basically, criminal gets sent files from the prosecutor. All the documents are there, but he's able to unredact all the names and see all the witnesses' names, see the victims' names, obviously in the documents, and see the police officers' names. Now, luckily, they're saying that this particular document access point at Barwon Prison in Geelong didn't have an internet connection going out. He couldn't take photos of the things. He was just able to view it. They're saying, if that makes people feel better. Obviously, the people who are on these lists and named would be quite concerned now that a murderer has seen the list of all the witnesses and all the things that they've said about them, for instance, and being able to tie all that up. Who knows how this type of thing ends? Again, I'm concerned about this because of the digitalization of everything that we're doing, and the fact that governments are pushing us towards this world where they offer us this illusion of security and safety. But you see how even the most basic things, like a document that should be redacted for privacy and safety concerns, can be compromised by the very people who are in charge of looking after that privacy and security. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoy your Saturday and the heat was not too unbearable. I hope you have survived and are ready for another hot day tomorrow on Sunday. I will join you then and discuss how I'm going. In terms of keeping up with my work, you can find me on YouTube at The Real Rukshan. Hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you're enjoying my videos. You can also find me on Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, Odyssey, and what else? I always forget all these ones. TikTok. I'm on TikTok, so if you want the CCP spying on you, you can find me on TikTok as well. I don't mind about the CCP. I actually use a separate device for TikTok specifically, but I will put my stuff up there.